The morning sun cast long shadows across the military base as Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell adjusted her uniform for what she believed would be just another routine training exercise. The fabric felt crisp against her skin, a stark contrast to the uncertainty that had been gnawing at her stomach for weeks. At 26, Sarah had already seen more combat than most soldiers twice her age, but something about today felt different. The air carried a tension that made even the most experienced personnel walk a little faster, speak a little quieter. Sarah had joined the military straight out of college, driven by a deep sense of duty that her father had instilled in her from childhood. Colonel James Mitchell had served 3 tours overseas before retiring to become a small-town police chief. He had never pushed Sarah toward military service, but his stories of protecting others and serving something greater than oneself had planted seeds that eventually grew into an unshakable conviction. Her mother, Elena, had worried constantly during Sarah's deployment to Afghanistan the previous year, but she had also been immensely proud when Sarah received a commendation for her leadership during a humanitarian mission in Kabul. The briefing room buzzed with nervous energy as soldiers filed in for their morning assignments. Sarah took her usual seat near the front, her notebook ready, pen poised to capture every detail. She had learned early in her career that preparation and attention to detail could mean the difference between life and death, not just for herself but for every person under her command. The responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders, but it was a weight she had learned to carry with grace and determination. Captain Rodriguez entered the room with his characteristic stern expression, but Sarah noticed something different in his eyes today. The usual confidence was replaced by something she couldn't quite identify. Was it concern? Fear? The captain's weathered face told stories of countless missions, and if something had him worried, it was worth paying attention to. He set down a thick folder on the podium and surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on each face as if memorizing them. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Rodriguez began, his voice carrying across the silent room like a stone dropped into still water. "Today's mission parameters have changed. What was scheduled as a training exercise has been upgraded to an active reconnaissance operation. Intelligence suggests increased hostile activity in Sector 7, and we need boots on the ground to assess the situation." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Sector 7 was known for its challenging terrain and history of insurgent activity. The rocky outcroppings and dense vegetation provided excellent cover for enemies, while the narrow valleys created natural choke points that could easily become death traps for unwary soldiers. She had studied the maps of that region extensively during her tactical training, memorizing every ridgeline and potential ambush point. The captain continued outlining the mission objectives: establish a forward observation post, gather intelligence on enemy movements, and report back within 48 hours. It sounded straightforward enough, but Sarah's experience had taught her that the simplest missions often became the most complicated. She glanced around the room at her fellow soldiers, noting the mix of excitement and apprehension on their faces. Some were fresh from basic training, eager to prove themselves in real combat situations. Others, like Sergeant Marcus Thompson beside her, bore the quiet confidence that came from surviving multiple deployments. Marcus had become something of a mentor to Sarah over the past year. 10 years her senior, he had a calm presence that steadied nerves and inspired confidence. His dark eyes held wisdom earned through experience, and his steady voice had talked more than one young soldier through their first taste of combat fear. Sarah appreciated his friendship and respected his judgment, often seeking his input on tactical decisions. Marcus had a wife and 2 young daughters back home in Ohio, and he carried their pictures everywhere, a constant reminder of what he was fighting to protect. As the briefing concluded and soldiers began filing out to prepare their gear, Marcus caught Sarah's attention with a subtle nod toward the door. They walked together toward the equipment lockers, their boots echoing in the concrete corridor. The familiar sounds of a military base surrounded them, distant voices calling out commands, the mechanical hum of vehicles being serviced, the rhythmic cadence of soldiers marching in formation. These sounds had become as comforting to Sarah as a lullaby, representing order and purpose in an often chaotic world. "What do you think about the intelligence report?" Sarah asked as they reached the equipment room. She trusted Marcus's instincts, and his opinion could help her better prepare mentally for what lay ahead. Marcus paused in checking his rifle, considering the question carefully before responding. "Something feels off," he admitted, running his hand along the weapon's barrel with practiced precision. Rodriguez seemed more tense than usual, and the change from training to active reconnaissance came down from higher up the chain. "That usually means someone knows more than they're telling us." Sarah nodded, her own instincts aligning with Marcus's assessment. She had learned to trust her gut feelings during her previous deployment, where intuition had saved her squad from an IED attack that intelligence had failed to predict. The ability to read between the lines and sense danger before it fully materialized was a skill that separated experienced soldiers from casualties. The equipment room buzzed with activity as soldiers prepared their gear with the methodical precision that had been drilled into them through countless hours of training. Sarah ran through her pre-mission checklist, examining each piece of equipment with the thoroughness of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. Her M4 carbine was cleaned and function-checked, magazines loaded and secured. Body armor was adjusted and double-checked for proper fit. Communications equipment was tested to ensure clear contact with base operations. Private First Class Jenny Walsh, one of the newer soldiers in Sarah's unit, approached with obvious nervousness written across her young features. At 19, Jenny reminded Sarah of herself just a few years earlier, eager to serve but still learning to manage the fear that came with real combat operations. Jenny's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her helmet, and Sarah recognized the signs of pre-mission anxiety that every soldier experienced but few openly acknowledged. "Lieutenant, do you think this mission will be dangerous?" Jenny asked quietly, her voice barely audible over the equipment room's background noise. Sarah appreciated the young woman's honesty in expressing her concerns rather than trying to appear fearlessly confident like some of the male soldiers often did. Sarah paused in her equipment check to give Jenny her full attention. Leadership meant more than tactical expertise, it meant understanding the emotional needs of the people under her command. She remembered her own first real mission and the terrifying mixture of excitement and fear that had kept her awake the entire night before deployment. "Every mission carries risks, Jenny," Sarah replied honestly, her voice carrying the confidence that came from experience while acknowledging the legitimate concerns. "But we're well trained, well equipped, and we'll be watching out for each other. Trust your training, stay alert, and remember that everyone here has your back." Jenny's posture straightened slightly, and some of the tension left her shoulders. Sarah understood the power of honest reassurance over false bravado. Soldiers needed to know their leaders took their concerns seriously while maintaining the confidence necessary to complete the mission successfully. As the afternoon wore on, final preparations were completed and the unit assembled for transport to the deployment zone. The helicopter's rotors created a thunderous din that made conversation impossible, leaving each soldier alone with their thoughts as the landscape passed below. Sarah watched the familiar terrain give way to the more rugged geography of Sector 7, noting key landmarks and potential navigation challenges they might face during their mission. The pilot's voice crackled through their headsets, announcing their approach to the landing zone. Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded every mission, her body's natural response to the transition from preparation to execution. This physiological reaction had become as routine as putting on her uniform, but she had learned to channel the energy into heightened awareness rather than letting it become overwhelming anxiety. The helicopter touched down in a clearing surrounded by dense vegetation, its rotors creating a whirlwind of dust and debris that temporarily obscured their vision. Sarah led her squad off the aircraft with practiced efficiency, immediately establishing a defensive perimeter while the helicopter departed. The sudden silence after the aircraft's departure always felt profound, marking the moment when soldiers truly committed to their mission and could no longer rely on immediate extraction or support. The terrain was exactly as challenging as the maps had indicated, steep slopes covered in thick undergrowth that would slow movement and provide excellent concealment for hostile forces. Sarah consulted her GPS and compass, orienting herself to their assigned route toward the observation post location. The path ahead would require careful navigation and constant vigilance, but her confidence in her squad's training and abilities remained strong. As they began their movement toward the target area, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus's instincts about the mission were correct. Something did feel different about this operation, though she couldn't pinpoint exactly what was triggering her unease. The intelligence briefing had been thorough, the equipment was functioning properly, and her squad was as prepared as any group of soldiers could be. Yet an undercurrent of tension seemed to permeate everything, like the atmospheric pressure change that preceded a violent storm. The first few hours of movement proceeded without incident, the squad maintaining proper spacing and communication protocols as they navigated through increasingly difficult terrain. Sarah found herself constantly scanning their surroundings, looking for anything that seemed out of place or potentially threatening. The weight of responsibility for her soldiers' safety never left her thoughts, creating a constant mental background of tactical assessment and contingency planning. As evening approached and they neared their designated observation post location, Sarah made the decision to establish their position slightly earlier than originally planned. The approaching darkness would provide better concealment for their activities, but it would also make movement more dangerous if they needed to relocate quickly. Her tactical training emphasized the importance of adaptive decision-making based on current conditions rather than rigid adherence to predetermined plans. The observation post was established with the quiet efficiency that marked professional soldiers at work. Fields of fire were established, communication equipment was set up and tested, and watch schedules were assigned to ensure continuous security throughout their planned 48-hour stay. Sarah felt a sense of satisfaction as everything came together according to their training, though the underlying tension she had felt throughout the day remained present. As the squad settled into their positions for the night, Sarah found herself thinking about her family back home. Her parents would be finishing dinner about now, probably discussing their day over coffee while her mother worried silently about her daughter's safety. The connection to home provided both comfort and additional motivation to ensure the mission's success and her squad's safe return. The night passed quietly, with regular check-ins with base operations confirming that all was proceeding according to plan. Sarah rotated through the watch schedule like any other squad member, understanding that leadership meant sharing the burdens of military life rather than simply issuing orders from a position of safety. The stars above Sector 7 were brilliant in the clear air, reminding her of camping trips with her father when she was younger, and he would tell her stories about his own military service. Dawn brought new challenges as the squad began their intelligence-gathering activities in earnest. The observation post provided excellent views of several key approach routes that hostile forces might use, but it also made them potentially visible to enemy reconnaissance. Sarah established strict protocols for movement and communication to minimize their signature while maintaining operational effectiveness. It was during the second day of their mission that everything began to change, though the initial signs were subtle enough that they might have been dismissed as routine variations in local activity. Sarah noticed an increase in civilian vehicle traffic on a road that intelligence had indicated was rarely used. Marcus observed what appeared to be signal lights flashing from a ridgeline several kilometers away, though they could have been reflections from metal objects or equipment. These small anomalies began to accumulate throughout the morning, creating a pattern that Sarah's trained instincts recognized as potentially significant. She increased the frequency of their reports to base operations, documenting each observation with precise timing and location data. The response from headquarters was routine acknowledgement, with no indication that command shared her growing concerns about the changing situation. By midday, the signs of increased hostile activity had become too obvious to ignore or dismiss as coincidence. Sarah observed armed individuals moving in small groups through terrain that provided concealment from their observation post, suggesting knowledge of their location that should not have been possible through routine reconnaissance. The implications were deeply troubling and suggested that their mission had been compromised from the beginning. Sarah faced a critical decision that would define not only the success of their mission but potentially the survival of her entire squad. Protocol dictated maintaining their position and continuing intelligence gathering until their scheduled extraction time, but her tactical assessment suggested that staying would likely result in their capture or elimination by hostile forces that appeared to be positioning for an attack on their location. The radio crackled with routine check-in requests from base operations, but Sarah hesitated to reveal the full extent of her concerns over potentially compromised communications. If hostile forces had advanced knowledge of their mission, they might also have the capability to monitor their radio transmissions. The decision to break mission protocol and initiate early extraction would require justification to her superiors, but Sarah's primary responsibility was to her soldiers' safety rather than rigid adherence to operational plans. As she prepared to make the call that would change everything, Sarah reflected on the training and experience that had brought her to this moment. Every decision she had made throughout her military career had been preparation for situations exactly like this one, where leadership meant taking responsibility for outcomes that could affect multiple lives. The weight of command had never felt heavier than it did in that moment, knowing that her next words could determine whether her squad returned home safely or became casualties of a mission that had already gone beyond their control. Sarah keyed her radio with steady fingers despite the racing of her heart, knowing that the next few minutes would determine the fate of everyone under her command. The static crackled briefly before her transmission cut through the electromagnetic silence that had surrounded their position for the past hour. Base operations, this is Eagle 7. Request immediate tactical consultation with actual. Her use of military terminology was deliberate, signaling to headquarters that this was not a routine communication but rather an urgent tactical situation requiring command attention. The response came back within seconds, though it felt like an eternity to Sarah as she watched Marcus adjust his position to better observe the approaching hostile forces. Eagle 7, this is base operations. Stand by for actual. Captain Rodriguez's familiar voice came through the radio with the clarity that indicated priority communications. Eagle 7, what's your situation? Sarah chose her words carefully, knowing that their communications might be intercepted while needing to convey the urgency of their circumstances. Actual, we have observed significant increases in local activity patterns that suggest our position may be compromised. Request guidance on mission modification. The silence that followed stretched longer than Sarah had expected, suggesting that her report was being discussed at levels above Captain Rodriguez. During this delay, she observed that the hostile forces were continuing to move closer to their position, using terrain features that would bring them within direct assault range within the next few hours. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly, and delay in decision-making could prove fatal for her entire squad. Marcus crawled over to Sarah's position, his movements careful to avoid skylining himself against the rocky outcropping that provided their primary concealment. His expression was grim as he leaned close enough to speak in barely audible whispers. Lieutenant, I count at least 20 hostiles moving toward our position from 3 different directions. They're using coordinated movement patterns that suggest advanced tactical training. This isn't a random patrol, they know exactly where we are. Sarah nodded, her tactical assessment aligning perfectly with Marcus's observations. The enemy's movement patterns indicated not only knowledge of their position but also a level of military sophistication that exceeded standard insurgent capabilities. This suggested either foreign military advisors or the involvement of specialized hostile forces that posed a significantly greater threat than their original mission briefing had indicated. Private Walsh had moved to a position where she could observe the western approach route, and her hand signals indicated additional hostile contacts moving in coordinated patterns. The young soldier's earlier nervousness had been replaced by the focused concentration that training had instilled, though Sarah could see the tension in her posture as the reality of their tactical situation became clear. The radio crackled again as Captain Rodriguez's voice returned with instructions that Sarah had both expected and dreaded. Eagle 7, maintain current position and continue mission objectives. Additional support assets are being positioned for potential assistance. Sarah felt a surge of frustration at the response, recognizing the gap between command's theoretical understanding of their situation and the tactical reality she was observing firsthand. Additional support assets would take hours to position effectively, and her squad's survival depended on decisions made within the next few minutes rather than support that might arrive too late to matter. Actual, hostile forces are moving to assault positions with estimated contact within 2 hours. Request immediate extraction authorization. Sarah's voice carried the controlled urgency of a professional soldier reporting facts rather than emotional reactions, though internally she felt the pressure of knowing that her soldiers' lives depended on convincing command to modify their operational approach. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of distant engines, suggesting that hostile forces were receiving their own reinforcements and equipment that would further complicate any extraction efforts. Sarah realized that their window of opportunity for safe withdrawal was closing rapidly, and that command's reluctance to authorize mission modification might result in casualties that could have been prevented through earlier action. Marcus had moved to check on the other squad members' positions and returned with additional disturbing intelligence. Lieutenant, Corporal Davis observed what appears to be heavy weapons being positioned on the ridgeline to our north. If they get those set up, they'll have direct fire on our position with no cover or concealment available. Sarah understood the implications immediately. Heavy weapons positioned on higher ground would eliminate their defensive advantages and make their current location untenable for survival, regardless of any support assets that might be en route. The tactical situation had moved beyond the parameters of their original mission and required immediate adaptation to prevent catastrophic casualties. She made a decision that would define her military career and potentially save her soldiers' lives, though it meant accepting personal responsibility for deviating from direct orders. All Eagle 7 elements, prepare for immediate tactical withdrawal. We are relocating to secondary position Alpha. The secondary position was a location Sarah had identified during their initial movement to the observation post, recognizing the value of always having contingency plans for tactical situations that might require rapid adaptation. It provided better defensive positions and multiple escape routes, though reaching it would require movement through terrain that exposed them to potential hostile observation. Sarah keyed her radio one final time before beginning their withdrawal. Base operations, Eagle 7 is executing tactical relocation due to immediate threat to position. Will report from secondary location. She switched off the radio before command could respond with orders that might conflict with her tactical decision, taking full responsibility for the consequences of prioritizing her soldiers' safety over strict adherence to operational instructions. The movement to their secondary position required every skill that Sarah's squad had learned during their training and previous combat experience. They moved in tactical formation, with each soldier responsible for observing specific sectors while maintaining the spacing and communication necessary for coordinated action. The terrain required careful navigation to avoid areas where they might be observed or where sound discipline could be compromised. Jenny Walsh demonstrated remarkable composure during the withdrawal, her earlier nervousness replaced by the focused professionalism that training had instilled. Sarah noted with pride how the young soldier maintained proper tactical procedures while adapting to the stress of their situation, proving that thorough preparation and leadership could overcome natural fear and uncertainty. The secondary position was reached without hostile contact, though Sarah observed signs that their original location was under observation and would likely have been attacked within the hour. Her decision to withdraw had been validated by subsequent events, though she understood that defending her actions to command would require careful documentation and justification based on tactical necessity rather than personal judgment. As her squad established defensive positions at their new location, Sarah reflected on the leadership lessons her father had taught her during her childhood. Colonel Mitchell had emphasized that true leadership sometimes required making unpopular decisions based on principles and facts rather than political considerations or personal advancement. The willingness to accept responsibility for difficult choices was what separated real leaders from people who simply held positions of authority. The new position provided better fields of observation and fire, allowing Sarah to assess the broader tactical situation that was developing throughout Sector 7. What she observed confirmed her worst suspicions about the nature of their mission and the intelligence failures that had placed her squad in unnecessary danger. Hostile forces were operating throughout the region in numbers and with coordination that far exceeded anything mentioned in their mission briefing. The level of organization and equipment suggested a planned operation rather than routine insurgent activity, indicating that intelligence had either failed to detect the true scope of hostile capabilities or had deliberately understated the threats to ensure mission execution. Marcus joined Sarah in observing the broader tactical picture, his experience helping to interpret the patterns of movement and positioning that indicated hostile intentions. "Lieutenant, this looks like preparation for a major operation, not the routine patrolling that intelligence reported. Someone seriously underestimated what we were walking into." Sarah nodded, understanding the implications for not only their immediate survival but also for other military units that might be operating in the region based on the same flawed intelligence assessments. Her squad's observations could provide critical information for preventing additional casualties, but only if they survived to deliver their reports and if command was willing to acknowledge the errors in their initial intelligence estimates. The afternoon was spent in careful observation and documentation of hostile activities, with Sarah maintaining detailed logs of enemy movements, equipment, and apparent objectives. This information would be crucial for debriefing sessions if they survived, but more immediately it helped her understand the tactical challenges they would face during extraction or any potential rescue operations. As evening approached, Sarah faced another critical decision about whether to attempt communication with command or maintain radio silence to avoid revealing their new position. The hostile forces had demonstrated sophisticated capabilities, and radio transmissions could provide electronic signatures that would compromise their location. However, base operations needed to understand the true scope of the tactical situation to avoid sending additional units into similar danger. Private Walsh had been monitoring their original observation post location through field glasses and reported increased hostile activity that confirmed Sarah's tactical assessment. "Lieutenant, I count vehicles and personnel moving into positions that would have surrounded our old location. They definitely knew where we were supposed to be." The implications were deeply disturbing, suggesting either a security breach in mission planning or intelligence capabilities that exceeded previous estimates of hostile technical abilities. Either possibility indicated systematic problems that extended beyond their immediate tactical situation and could affect the safety of military operations throughout the region. Sarah decided to risk limited radio communication to warn command about the broader tactical situation, accepting the possibility that hostile forces might detect their transmissions. The information was too important to withhold based solely on personal survival considerations, particularly if other military units might be placed in similar danger through reliance on flawed intelligence assessments. "Base operations, this is Eagle 7 at secondary position. Observed hostile activity indicates major operation in progress with capabilities significantly exceeding initial intelligence estimates. Recommend immediate review of all unit deployments in Sector 7. The response was immediate and carried a tone that suggested command was beginning to understand the seriousness of their intelligence failures. Eagle 7, report your current tactical situation and extraction requirements. Sarah provided a detailed summary of their observations and current position, emphasizing the coordination and equipment levels that indicated hostile forces far more capable than originally assessed. She requested immediate extraction authorization, though she understood that tactical conditions might make such operations extremely dangerous for both her squad and any rescue forces. Captain Rodriguez's voice returned with instructions that indicated significant changes in command's understanding of the situation. Eagle 7, extraction assets are being prepared, but current tactical conditions may delay operations until nightfall. Maintain current position and continue intelligence gathering until extraction window opens. The delay meant spending additional hours in hostile territory with enemy forces actively searching for their location, but Sarah understood the tactical realities that made immediate extraction impossible. Helicopter operations in contested airspace required careful coordination and support assets that took time to position effectively. Her squad's survival would depend on remaining undetected until conditions allowed safe extraction. As darkness approached, the level of hostile activity in their vicinity increased dramatically, suggesting that enemy forces were conducting systematic searches for their location. Sarah observed coordinated movement patterns that indicated professional military training and equipment that included night vision capabilities that could compromise their concealment after dark. The tactical situation required constant adaptation as hostile forces moved closer to their position throughout the evening. Sarah repositioned her soldiers multiple times to maintain concealment while preserving their ability to observe enemy activities and maintain communication with base operations. Each movement carried the risk of detection, but remaining static in positions that hostile forces were systematically searching would guarantee discovery and probable elimination. Marcus had taken responsibility for coordinating their defensive preparations, understanding that combat contact was becoming increasingly likely despite their efforts to remain undetected. His experience in urban warfare provided valuable insights into defensive tactics that could maximize their survival chances if their position was discovered before extraction assets arrived. Jenny Walsh continued to demonstrate remarkable professional growth under pressure, adapting to their changing tactical situation with the flexibility that marked experienced soldiers. Sarah noted with satisfaction how the young woman's training was overcoming natural fear and uncertainty, proving that thorough preparation could enable individuals to perform effectively even in extremely dangerous circumstances. The radio brought updates on extraction preparations, though the timeline remained uncertain due to the complexity of coordinating air operations in contested territory. Sarah understood that command was balancing the urgency of her squad situation against the risks of losing additional personnel and equipment through hasty operations that might fail due to inadequate preparation. As the night deepened, Sarah reflected on the series of decisions and circumstances that had brought her squad to their current situation. The mission had begun as routine training but had evolved into a survival situation that tested every aspect of their military training and personal character. The experience was providing lessons in leadership and tactical adaptation that no training exercise could duplicate, though the price of that education was measured in very real danger to her soldiers' lives. The sound of approaching aircraft in the distance suggested that extraction operations were finally beginning, though Sarah understood that reaching pickup zones would require movement through terrain that hostile forces were actively patrolling. The next few hours would determine whether her tactical decisions had successfully preserved her squad's lives or whether their mission would end in tragedy despite her best efforts to adapt to changing circumstances. The distant sound of aircraft engines created a mixture of hope and terror in Sarah's chest as she realized that extraction was finally approaching, though reaching the pickup zone would require traversing nearly 2 kilometers of territory that hostile forces had been systematically searching throughout the night. Her squad's survival would depend on precise timing, perfect execution, and, perhaps most importantly, the kind of luck that seemed to abandon soldiers when they needed it most. Sarah gathered her squad for final preparations, checking each soldier's equipment and mental state before beginning what might be their most dangerous movement since the mission began. The night vision goggles revealed expressions of controlled determination mixed with the natural fear that any rational person would experience when facing potentially lethal circumstances. She felt a surge of pride in their professionalism despite the terror that was undoubtedly affecting each of them. "Listen carefully," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible even to soldiers positioned just meters away. "We have one chance to reach the extraction point without detection. Stay low, maintain spacing, and remember that our survival depends on moving like ghosts through territory that's crawling with people who want to kill us. Marcus nodded his understanding, his years of combat experience evident in the calm efficiency with which he prepared for movement. His steady presence had become an anchor for the younger soldiers, providing the confidence that came from following someone who had survived similar situations through skill and careful preparation rather than just luck. Jenny Walsh checked her weapon one final time, her movements displaying the mechanical precision that training had instilled despite the psychological pressure of their circumstances. Sarah noted with satisfaction how the young soldier had transformed from the nervous recruit who had asked about danger just days earlier into a professional warrior ready to do whatever was necessary to ensure her squad's survival. The movement began with Sarah taking point position, using her knowledge of the terrain and tactical training to identify the safest route toward their extraction coordinates. Every step required careful consideration of noise discipline, concealment opportunities, and potential reaction procedures if they encountered hostile forces during their movement. The weight of responsibility for her soldiers' lives had never felt heavier than it did during those first few minutes of what could be their final tactical operation. The terrain they needed to cross included several natural choke points where hostile forces could easily establish ambush positions, forcing Sarah to choose between speed and security in ways that could determine whether her squad lived or died. She chose a route that added nearly 30 minutes to their movement time but avoided the most obvious danger areas, accepting the risk of delayed arrival at the extraction point in exchange for reduced probability of detection during their approach. The first hour of movement proceeded without enemy contact, though Sarah observed multiple indicators that hostile forces were continuing their search operations throughout the region. Distant voices carried on the night air, vehicle engines suggested coordinated movement, and occasional light sources indicated that their enemies possessed night vision capabilities that could compromise concealment if they were detected. Marcus moved with the silent efficiency that came from years of combat experience, his positioning and movement techniques providing tactical lessons for the younger soldiers while maintaining the security procedures necessary for their survival. His ability to anticipate terrain challenges and potential danger areas helped Sarah navigate their route with increased confidence in their ability to avoid detection. As they approached the halfway point in their movement, Sarah's radio crackled with a transmission that brought both relief and increased pressure. Eagle 7, extraction assets are inbound to pickup zone. Estimate arrival in 45 minutes. Confirm your ability to reach extraction coordinates. Sarah keyed her radio briefly, understanding that extended transmissions could provide electronic signatures for enemy direction-finding equipment. Base operations, Eagle 7 is en route. Estimate arrival within timeline. She switched off the radio immediately after transmitting, hoping that the brief communication had not revealed their location to hostile forces who might be monitoring military frequencies. The pressure of the extraction timeline created tactical challenges that required balancing speed against security in ways that tested every aspect of Sarah's military training. Moving faster increased their chances of reaching the pickup zone on schedule but also raised the probability of making noise or becoming visible to hostile forces who were actively searching for their location. The mathematical precision required for such decisions under extreme stress was exactly the kind of leadership challenge that separated competent officers from those who failed when circumstances demanded flawless judgment. Jenny Walsh maintained perfect discipline during the movement, her earlier nervousness completely replaced by the focused professionalism that emerged when soldiers understood their survival depended on executing their training with precision. Sarah observed with pride how the young woman adapted to changing terrain and tactical requirements, proving that thorough preparation could enable individuals to perform effectively even under the most extreme psychological pressure. The sound of approaching helicopters became audible as they neared their extraction coordinates, though the aircraft were still several minutes away from actual arrival at the pickup zone. The timing would be critical. Arriving too early would expose them to detection while waiting for extraction, but arriving late could result in missing their window for evacuation if hostile forces forced the aircraft to abort their mission. Sarah's tactical calculations were interrupted by Marcus's hand signal indicating enemy contacts ahead of their position. Through her night vision goggles, she observed a patrol of hostile forces moving directly across their planned route to the extraction point. The enemy soldiers were using coordinated movement patterns that indicated professional training and were equipped with weapons and communication gear that exceeded typical insurgent capabilities. The patrol's positioning created an impossible tactical situation. Continuing on their current route would almost certainly result in detection and combat contact, but detouring around the enemy position would delay their arrival beyond the extraction window. Sarah faced a decision that epitomized the cruel mathematics of combat leadership, where every option carried potentially fatal consequences and success required choosing the least terrible alternative. Sarah signaled for her squad to take concealed positions while she assessed their options and the movement patterns of the hostile patrol. The enemy soldiers appeared to be conducting systematic searches of the area, suggesting that they suspected the presence of military forces even if they didn't know exact locations. Their search pattern indicated that they would eventually discover Sarah's squad regardless of concealment efforts, making combat contact increasingly unavoidable. The extraction helicopters' approaching sound created additional pressure as Sarah realized that the noise would mask any sounds of combat but would also alert hostile forces throughout the region to the presence of extraction operations. The timing of any engagement would need to account for the aircraft's arrival and departure schedule, as delay in reaching the pickup zone could result in abandonment if hostile fire made the extraction too dangerous to continue. Marcus crawled to Sarah's position with a tactical assessment that confirmed her worst fears about their situation.
"Lieutenant, that patrol is moving in a pattern that will bring them directly to our position within 10 minutes. We can't avoid contact, so we need to control the timing and location of the engagement."
Sarah nodded, understanding that Marcus was correct about the inevitability of combat contact. Her training had prepared her for such situations, emphasizing that when violence became unavoidable, the key to survival was ensuring that it occurred at a time and place of her choosing rather than allowing the enemy to dictate the circumstances of engagement. "We take them when they reach that clearing ahead," Sarah whispered, indicating a position where the terrain would provide tactical advantages for her squad while creating disadvantages for the enemy patrol.
"Quick, violent engagement, then immediate movement to extraction coordinates.
No time for anything except winning fast and getting out."
The next few minutes felt like hours as Sarah's squad prepared for combat while watching the hostile patrol move toward the engagement area she had selected.
Each soldier understood their role in the upcoming battle and the critical importance of executing their training with precision under circumstances where mistakes would likely prove fatal for everyone involved. Jenny Walsh positioned herself where her marksmanship training would be most effective, her earlier transformation from nervous recruit to professional soldier now complete as she prepared to engage in lethal combat for the first time. Sarah felt a mixture of pride and sadness as she observed how circumstances had forced such rapid professional development, understanding that combat would change the young woman's perspective on life and military service in ways that no amount of training could duplicate. The hostile patrol entered the engagement area exactly as Sarah had predicted, their movement patterns and positioning creating the tactical opportunities she had anticipated. She gave the signal for engagement, and her squad opened fire with the coordinated precision that months of training had instilled, creating devastating effects on enemy forces who were caught completely unprepared for the sudden violence that erupted from their concealed positions. The combat lasted less than 3 minutes, but the intensity of those moments compressed a lifetime of training and preparation into actions that determined whether her squad would survive to see another day. Sarah's leadership during the engagement combined tactical expertise with the kind of calm decision-making under extreme stress that separated competent officers from those who failed when their soldiers' lives depended on flawless performance. The hostile patrol was eliminated with remarkable efficiency, though Sarah understood that the sound of gunfire would alert other enemy forces throughout the region to their location and the presence of extraction operations. Their window for reaching the pickup zone and departing safely was now measured in minutes rather than hours, creating pressure for movement that balanced speed against the tactical security necessary for survival. "Move to extraction now," Sarah commanded, her voice carrying the urgent authority that combat situations demanded. Her squad responded with the immediate obedience that training had instilled, understanding that delay or hesitation could prove fatal as hostile reinforcements responded to the sounds of combat and moved to intercept their withdrawal to the pickup zone. The movement to extraction coordinates required crossing nearly half a kilometer of open terrain while hostile forces throughout the region were responding to the combat contact and attempting to locate Sarah's squad. The mathematical precision required for such movement under extreme pressure tested every aspect of their military training while demanding the kind of leadership that could inspire ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things under impossible circumstances. Sarah led the movement with tactical expertise that combined theoretical training with practical experience gained through previous combat operations. Her ability to read terrain and anticipate enemy movements while maintaining awareness of her squad's condition and capabilities enabled navigation through dangerous territory with the kind of precision that kept soldiers alive when circumstances demanded flawless execution. The extraction helicopters appeared over the horizon exactly as scheduled, their presence creating both relief and increased urgency as Sarah realized that reaching the pickup zone on time would require maintaining their current pace despite fatigue and the psychological stress of recent combat. The aircraft represented salvation, but only if her squad could traverse the remaining distance without being intercepted by hostile forces who were converging on their location. Marcus maintained rearguard position during their movement, his experience enabling him to detect signs of pursuit while providing security for the squad's withdrawal. His calm professionalism under extreme pressure continued to provide stability for the younger soldiers, demonstrating the leadership qualities that emerged when competent people were placed in positions where their actions directly affected others' survival. Jenny Walsh moved with remarkable endurance and determination, her earlier transformation now complete as she demonstrated the kind of physical and mental toughness that enabled soldiers to continue functioning effectively even when circumstances pushed human capabilities beyond normal limits. Sarah noted with pride how combat had revealed the young woman's true character and potential for leadership in future operations. The pickup zone appeared ahead of their position just as the extraction helicopters began their approach, creating the kind of precise timing that successful military operations required. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction as her tactical calculations proved accurate, though she understood that their survival was not guaranteed until they were actually aboard the aircraft and departing from hostile territory. The helicopters landed in a thunderous display of mechanical power that created dust clouds and noise levels that provided concealment for final approach while also alerting every hostile force in the region to the exact location of extraction operations. Sarah led her squad toward the aircraft with the kind of sprint that exhausted soldiers could somehow manage when survival depended on reaching safety within seconds rather than minutes. The crew chief's urgent gestures indicated that loading needed to occur immediately, as hostile forces were already moving to engage the extraction aircraft with weapons that could destroy the helicopters and kill everyone aboard. Sarah ensured that each of her soldiers was safely aboard before taking her own position, understanding that leadership meant being the last person to reach safety while maintaining responsibility for everyone under her command. As the helicopters lifted off and began their departure from Sector 7, Sarah felt the complex mixture of relief and professional satisfaction that came from successfully completing an impossible mission through skill, preparation, and the kind of leadership that enabled ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things under extreme circumstances. Her squad had survived not only through individual competence but through the collective teamwork that months of training had developed into instinctive cooperation during life-or-death situations. The flight back to base provided time for initial reflection on the events of the past 48 hours and the lessons that would emerge from debriefing sessions with intelligence officers and command personnel. Sarah understood that their observations about hostile capabilities and intelligence failures would require detailed documentation and analysis to prevent similar situations from endangering additional military units in future operations. Marcus approached Sarah during the flight with the kind of quiet conversation that experienced soldiers shared after surviving dangerous situations.
"Lieutenant, your tactical decisions saved our lives out there.
The withdrawal from our original position and the engagement timing were exactly what the situation required." Sarah appreciated the recognition from someone whose judgment she respected, though she understood that leadership evaluation would ultimately depend on official debriefing sessions and command assessment of her decisions to deviate from mission instructions. Her priority had been her soldiers' survival rather than strict adherence to operational plans that had been based on flawed intelligence assessments. Jenny Walsh sat quietly during the flight, processing her first combat experience with the kind of internal reflection that would shape her future military service and personal development. Sarah observed the young woman's composure and understood that combat had revealed character traits and capabilities that peacetime training could never fully develop or evaluate. As they approached their base, Sarah reflected on the leadership lessons learned during their mission and the personal growth that had emerged from accepting responsibility for life-or-death decisions under extreme pressure. The experience had tested every aspect of her military training while demanding the kind of moral courage that separated competent leaders from those who failed when circumstances required difficult choices that could affect multiple lives. The landing at their base marked the end of their immediate danger, though Sarah understood that the most challenging aspects of their mission might occur during debriefing sessions when she would need to justify her tactical decisions to command officers who had not experienced the situation firsthand. Her ability to document and explain her reasoning would determine not only her personal military future but also the lessons that would be incorporated into training for other units facing similar challenges. The debriefing room felt sterile and cold compared to the harsh realities of Sector 7, its fluorescent lighting and polished table creating an atmosphere that seemed designed for administrative procedures rather than analyzing life-or-death decisions made under extreme combat conditions. Sarah sat across from a panel of officers whose expressions ranged from professional interest to barely concealed skepticism about her tactical choices during the mission that had ended just 12 hours earlier. Colonel Harrison, the base commander, reviewed the preliminary mission report with the methodical attention to detail that characterized his approach to military operations. His weathered face bore the kind of lines that came from decades of making difficult decisions and accepting responsibility for their consequences, creating an expression that revealed nothing about his assessment of Sarah's performance during circumstances that had exceeded all original mission parameters. "Lieutenant Mitchell," Colonel Harrison began, his voice carrying the neutral tone that senior officers used when discussing matters that could affect careers and future assignments. "Your decision to withdraw from the assigned observation post represents a significant deviation from operational instructions. Please explain the tactical reasoning that led to this choice." Sarah had prepared for this question during the helicopter flight back to base, understanding that her ability to articulate her decision-making process would determine not only her personal future but also the lessons that would be extracted from their experience. Her response needed to demonstrate sound tactical judgment while acknowledging the challenges of making command decisions based on incomplete information under extreme pressure. "Sir, the tactical situation developed beyond the parameters of our original mission briefing," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the internal tension she felt about defending decisions that had probably saved her squad's lives but might be viewed as insubordination by officers who had not experienced the situation firsthand. "Hostile activity indicated systematic knowledge of our position and capabilities that suggested compromise of our operational security." Captain Rodriguez, who had provided the original mission briefing, leaned forward with an expression that suggested professional interest rather than criticism. His experience with tactical operations provided the background necessary for understanding the complexities that emerged when theoretical planning encountered practical realities in combat situations. "Lieutenant, intelligence assessments indicated routine insurgent activity with minimal threat to properly positioned observation posts. What specific indicators led you to conclude that hostile forces possessed advanced knowledge of your mission parameters?" Sarah referred to the detailed notes she had maintained throughout their operation, understanding that precise documentation would be critical for supporting her tactical assessment and the decisions that had emerged from field conditions rather than conference room planning. Her ability to present factual analysis rather than emotional reactions would determine how her leadership was evaluated by the review panel. "Sir, hostile movement patterns indicated coordinated activities that exceeded typical insurgent capabilities. Enemy forces demonstrated knowledge of terrain features and tactical positions that suggested either advanced reconnaissance or prior intelligence about our mission objectives and location." Major Williams, the intelligence officer responsible for the original threat assessment, reviewed computer displays that contained information gathered from multiple sources throughout Sector 7. His expression suggested the kind of professional concern that emerged when field reports contradicted analytical conclusions that had been used for operational planning. "Lieutenant, subsequent intelligence analysis has confirmed significant gaps in our assessment of hostile capabilities in Sector 7. Your field observations have provided critical information that explains discrepancies between our estimates and actual enemy strength and coordination." Major Williams paused, consulting additional data before continuing. "Your tactical decisions appear to have been based on accurate field assessment of a situation that exceeded our preliminary intelligence estimates." Sarah felt a surge of relief as the intelligence officer's statement validated her tactical judgment while acknowledging the systematic failures that had placed her squad in unnecessary danger. The recognition that her field assessment had been accurate provided professional vindication, though she understood that the broader implications of intelligence failures would require additional investigation and procedural changes. Marcus had been called to provide his assessment of the mission events, his years of combat experience providing credibility for supporting Sarah's tactical decisions. His testimony would carry significant weight with the review panel, as senior non-commissioned officers' opinions were highly valued for their practical experience and direct knowledge of combat realities. "Sir, Lieutenant Mitchell's tactical decisions were exactly appropriate for the situation we encountered," Marcus stated with the kind of clear conviction that came from professional expertise rather than personal loyalty. Her withdrawal from our original position prevented what would have been certain casualties, and her timing for the engagement that allowed our extraction demonstrated the kind of battlefield leadership that keeps soldiers alive. Jenny Walsh's testimony provided additional perspective on the mission from someone experiencing her first combat operation, offering insights into how Sarah's leadership had affected a soldier who lacked previous experience for comparison. Her observations about tactical training and decision-making under pressure would provide valuable information for evaluating leadership effectiveness during extreme circumstances. "Ma'am, Lieutenant Mitchell's leadership gave me confidence even when I was scared," Jenny testified, her voice carrying the sincerity that came from genuine gratitude rather than military protocol. She explained what was happening and why we needed to move, and her tactical decisions made sense even to someone with limited experience like me. The review panel spent considerable time analyzing the technical aspects of the mission, including communication procedures, tactical movement, and engagement protocols. Sarah's adherence to military standards while adapting to changing circumstances demonstrated the kind of flexible leadership that training was designed to develop, but that could only be truly tested under actual combat conditions. Colonel Harrison reviewed the complete mission file before delivering his assessment of Sarah's performance and the broader implications of their experience in Sector 7. His evaluation would determine not only Sarah's immediate future but also the tactical lessons that would be incorporated into training for other units facing similar challenges. Lieutenant Mitchell, your tactical decisions during this mission demonstrate sound judgment under extreme circumstances and appropriate adaptation to field conditions that exceeded original mission parameters. Your leadership prevented casualties while gathering critical intelligence that has revealed significant gaps in our threat assessment procedures. Sarah felt profound relief as the colonel's words confirmed that her leadership would be evaluated based on results rather than strict adherence to orders that had been based on flawed intelligence. The recognition that her decisions had prevented casualties while accomplishing mission objectives provided the kind of professional validation that sustained military careers through difficult periods. The debriefing concluded with discussions about procedural changes that would emerge from lessons learned during their operation. Sarah's field observations would contribute to improved intelligence gathering and threat assessment protocols that could prevent similar situations from endangering future military operations in contested regions. As the formal proceedings ended, Colonel Harrison requested a private conversation with Sarah about her career development and future assignments. His interest in her leadership potential suggested that her performance during the mission had been noticed by senior officers responsible for identifying and developing talented personnel for increased responsibilities. Lieutenant, your performance during this mission demonstrates the kind of tactical judgment and leadership capability that the military needs for complex operations in contested environments, Colonel Harrison explained. I'm recommending you for advanced tactical training that could lead to company-level command positions. Sarah appreciated the recognition while understanding that increased responsibility would bring additional challenges and pressure. Her experience in Sector 7 had tested every aspect of her military training while revealing both her capabilities and the areas where additional development would be beneficial for future leadership roles. The weeks following their return from Sector 7 brought a series of changes that affected not only Sarah's squad but also broader military operations in the region. Intelligence procedures were revised based on lessons learned from their mission, and tactical training was modified to better prepare soldiers for situations where field conditions exceeded planning assumptions. Marcus received a commendation for his performance during the mission, recognition that acknowledged his contribution to their survival and the value of experienced non-commissioned officers in supporting tactical operations. His steady professionalism under extreme pressure had provided exactly the kind of leadership support that enabled junior officers to make effective decisions during their first complex combat operations. Jenny Walsh's performance during her first combat mission resulted in accelerated promotion opportunities and assignment to advanced training programs. Her transformation from nervous recruit to competent soldier demonstrated the effectiveness of thorough preparation combined with strong leadership during actual operations, providing validation for training methods that emphasized both individual competence and collective teamwork. Sarah found herself assigned to a position that involved training other officers in tactical decision-making and leadership under pressure, using her experience in Sector 7 as a foundation for developing scenarios that would test judgment and adaptability. Her ability to articulate the decision-making process under extreme circumstances provided valuable insights for improving military education and preparation. The personal impact of their mission extended beyond professional recognition and career advancement to include changes in how Sarah viewed leadership responsibility and the weight of making decisions that affected other people's lives. The experience had tested her character while revealing both her capabilities and the ongoing development necessary for increased responsibilities in future operations. Months later, Sarah received word that intelligence gathered during their mission had contributed to successful operations that eliminated hostile capabilities throughout Sector 7 and beyond. The information her squad had collected under dangerous circumstances had provided strategic value that exceeded their original mission objectives, validating the risks they had accepted and the tactical decisions that had enabled their survival. The recognition that their sacrifice and courage had contributed to broader military success provided the kind of professional satisfaction that sustained career military personnel through difficult periods and dangerous assignments. Sarah understood that their experience represented the kind of contribution that individual soldiers could make to larger strategic objectives when they maintained professional standards while adapting to challenging circumstances. As Sarah prepared for her next assignment, she reflected on the lessons learned during her first complex leadership challenge and the personal growth that had emerged from accepting responsibility for life or death decisions under extreme pressure. The experience had shaped her understanding of military leadership while providing the confidence necessary for accepting increased responsibilities in future operations. The bonds formed with Marcus and Jenny during their shared experience in Sector 7 had created relationships that would continue throughout their military careers, providing the kind of mutual trust and understanding that emerged when people survived dangerous situations through collective effort and competent leadership. These relationships represented one of the most valuable aspects of military service, creating connections based on shared sacrifice and mutual dependence that extended far beyond formal organizational structures. Sarah's parents had been informed of her commendation and the recognition she had received for her leadership during the mission, though the specific details of their operations remained classified. Colonel Mitchell's pride in his daughter's military service was evident in their conversations, while Elena's relief at her daughter's safe return was tempered by understanding that future assignments would likely involve similar risks and responsibilities. The experience in Sector 7 had become a defining moment in Sarah's military career, establishing her reputation as a competent tactical leader while providing the foundation for future assignments that would test her abilities at increasingly complex levels of responsibility. Her ability to make sound decisions under extreme pressure while maintaining care for her soldiers' welfare had been noted by senior officers responsible for developing military leadership for future challenges. 3 years after the Sector 7 mission, Captain Sarah Mitchell stood in the mirror of her quarters, adjusting her dress uniform for what would be the most challenging day of her military career. The fabric felt different than it had as a lieutenant, heavier somehow, weighted with the accumulated experiences of multiple deployments and the responsibility that came with company-level command. Today she would face a situation that no amount of training or previous combat experience could have prepared her for, though every lesson learned during those formative years would be essential for surviving what lay ahead. The mission briefing had been classified at levels that required special security clearances, indicating operations that extended beyond routine military activities into areas where success or failure could affect national security interests. Sarah's company had been selected for deployment to a region where intelligence indicated sophisticated hostile forces were planning operations that could destabilize an entire geographic area, requiring the kind of precision military response that only the most experienced and capable units could execute successfully. Captain Rodriguez, now promoted to major and serving as battalion operations officer, had conducted the final briefing with the kind of serious intensity that indicated genuine concern about mission complexity and potential casualties. His respect for Sarah's tactical capabilities had grown significantly since their shared experience in Sector 7, creating professional relationships based on mutual trust and demonstrated competence under extreme pressure. Sarah, Major Rodriguez had said during their private conversation after the briefing, "This operation will test everything you've learned about leadership and tactical decision-making. The hostile forces you'll be facing possess capabilities that exceed anything we encountered in Sector 7, and the strategic implications of success or failure extend far beyond immediate tactical objectives." Sarah had accepted the mission with the kind of calm professionalism that came from years of preparing for exactly such challenges, though she understood that commanding a company-sized unit in complex operations would require skills and judgment that exceeded anything she had previously experienced. Her soldiers' lives would depend on decisions made under circumstances where mistakes could result in catastrophic casualties and strategic failures with lasting consequences. The flight to their deployment area provided time for final equipment checks and mental preparation for operations that would unfold in hostile territory where enemy forces possessed advanced weapons and sophisticated tactical training. Sarah moved through her company's positions in the aircraft, checking on individual soldiers while maintaining the kind of visible leadership presence that inspired confidence during periods of uncertainty and stress. Sergeant First Class Jenny Walsh, now serving as one of Sarah's squad leaders, had developed into exactly the kind of professional non-commissioned officer that formed the backbone of military units engaged in complex operations. Her transformation from nervous recruit to experienced leader demonstrated the effectiveness of thorough training combined with strong mentorship, creating capabilities that would be essential for the challenging missions ahead. Master Sergeant Marcus Thompson had requested assignment to Sarah's company based on their previous successful collaboration and his confidence in her leadership abilities. His presence provided continuity and experience that would be invaluable during operations where split-second decisions could determine the difference between mission success and unit destruction under extremely dangerous circumstances. The target area was a mountainous region where hostile forces had established sophisticated defensive positions using natural terrain features and advanced military equipment. Intelligence indicated that enemy capabilities included heavy weapons, coordinated communication systems, and tactical training that approached professional military standards, creating challenges that would require precise coordination and flawless execution for successful mission completion. Sarah's company landed during pre-dawn hours using helicopter insertion techniques that minimized their exposure to hostile detection while positioning them for tactical movement toward their assigned objectives. The landing zone was secured quickly and efficiently, demonstrating the kind of professional competence that months of preparation and training had developed into instinctive responses during high-pressure situations. The initial movement toward their target proceeded according to plan, with Sarah's carefully coordinated tactical formations advancing through challenging terrain while maintaining the security procedures necessary for avoiding detection by hostile forces who were known to patrol the region with sophisticated equipment and professional training. Her ability to coordinate multiple units while adapting to changing terrain and tactical conditions demonstrated the leadership skills that had been developed through years of experience and education. Contact with hostile forces occurred sooner than intelligence estimates had predicted, though Sarah's tactical preparations enabled her company to respond with immediate and coordinated action that prevented the enemy from achieving tactical surprise. The engagement demonstrated both the accuracy of her tactical planning and the high level of training that her soldiers had achieved through months of preparation for exactly such circumstances. The battle that followed tested every aspect of Sarah's leadership and tactical expertise as she coordinated company-level operations against sophisticated hostile forces in terrain that provided advantages for defensive positions. Her ability to maintain unit cohesion while adapting to rapidly changing tactical conditions enabled her soldiers to achieve their objectives despite encountering enemy capabilities that exceeded original intelligence estimates. Master Sergeant Thompson's experience proved invaluable during the most challenging phases of the operation, as his tactical expertise and calm leadership provided stability for younger soldiers experiencing their first complex combat operations. His ability to anticipate tactical developments and provide appropriate responses demonstrated the value of experienced non-commissioned officers in supporting company-level operations under extreme circumstances. Sergeant First Class Walsh led her squad with remarkable competence during movements that required precise coordination and split-second timing for success. Her development from uncertain recruit to confident leader provided an example of how thorough training and strong mentorship could create the kind of professional soldiers necessary for complex military operations in contested environments. The tactical situation evolved throughout the day as Sarah's company encountered multiple hostile positions that required individual assault operations while maintaining overall mission objectives. Her ability to coordinate these simultaneous actions while preserving unit cohesion demonstrated leadership skills that had been developed through years of education and practical experience in increasingly complex operations. During the most critical phase of their operation, Sarah faced a tactical decision that would determine not only the success of their immediate mission but also the survival of soldiers under her command. Enemy forces had positioned heavy weapons that could destroy her advancing units, but assault operations would require accepting casualties that might exceed acceptable limits for mission success. The decision required balancing strategic objectives against the moral responsibility of leadership for soldiers whose lives depended on her tactical judgment under extreme pressure. Sarah's choice to accept personal risk while minimizing danger to her soldiers demonstrated the kind of leadership that inspired absolute loyalty while achieving objectives that seemed impossible under the circumstances they encountered. The assault on enemy positions succeeded through precise coordination and the kind of courage that emerged when competent soldiers were led by officers who shared their dangers while maintaining tactical effectiveness. Sarah's presence at the point of greatest risk inspired her soldiers to achieve performance levels that exceeded their previous capabilities, demonstrating the power of leadership by example during extreme circumstances. The mission concluded successfully with all strategic objectives achieved and minimal casualties despite encountering hostile capabilities that had exceeded intelligence estimates. Sarah's leadership during the operation earned recognition from senior commanders while providing valuable lessons for future operations in contested environments where enemy sophistication required corresponding excellence in military preparation and execution. The flight back to base provided time for reflection on the operations lessons and the personal growth that had emerged from accepting responsibility for company-level command during complex combat operations. Sarah understood that her performance had established her reputation as a tactical leader capable of succeeding under extreme circumstances while maintaining the welfare of soldiers under her command. However, the true test of her mission's impact would not be revealed until several weeks later, when intelligence reports indicated that their successful operation had prevented a planned terrorist attack that could have resulted in hundreds of civilian casualties in major population centers. The strategic value of their tactical success had extended far beyond immediate military objectives to include protection of innocent people who would never know how close they had come to devastating tragedy. The recognition that their sacrifice and courage had protected civilian lives provided the kind of professional satisfaction that sustained military personnel through dangerous assignments and difficult personal costs. Sarah understood that their contribution represented the highest purpose of military service, the protection of people who could not protect themselves from those who would do them harm. As Sarah prepared for her next assignment, which would involve training other officers in company-level command techniques, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from uncertain lieutenant to confident captain capable of leading complex operations under extreme circumstances. Each challenge had provided lessons that would be essential for future responsibilities, creating capabilities that could only be developed through actual experience under pressure. The relationships formed with soldiers like Master Sergeant Thompson and Sergeant First Class Walsh had become more than professional associations. They represented the kind of bonds that emerged when people shared extreme dangers while depending on each other for survival. These connections would continue throughout their military careers, providing mutual support and understanding that extended far beyond formal organizational structures. Years later, when Sarah had advanced to field-grade officer positions with responsibility for multiple units and strategic planning, she would reflect on the foundational experiences that had shaped her understanding of military leadership and personal courage. The lessons learned during her early career continue to influence her decision-making and approach to developing other officers for positions of increased responsibility. The morning when everything changed began like any other day in Sarah's new assignment as a training officer responsible for developing tactical leadership skills in junior officers. She had arrived early to review lesson plans and prepare for classes that would use her combat experience to illustrate principles of decision-making under pressure. The routine felt comfortable after years of operational assignments, providing opportunities to share hard-won knowledge with the next generation of military leaders. The call came during her first class of the day, interrupting a discussion about tactical decision-making with an urgency that immediately indicated something beyond routine military business. Colonel Harrison's voice carried a tension that Sarah recognized from previous situations where lives hung in the balance and immediate action was required to prevent catastrophic outcomes.
Sarah, we need you at the hospital immediately.
There's been an incident during a training exercise, and we have casualties that require immediate attention. Your experience with tactical medicine and crisis leadership makes you the best qualified officer available for this situation. The drive to the base hospital felt like traveling through a nightmare as Sarah's mind raced through possibilities about what kind of training accident could require her specific expertise. Her experience with combat medicine and crisis management had been developed through actual operations rather than classroom instruction, creating capabilities that few officers possessed for dealing with complex medical emergencies under pressure. The hospital corridor was filled with activity that indicated multiple casualties and medical situations requiring coordinated response from various specialists. Sarah's arrival was noted by medical personnel who directed her toward a specific area where her expertise was most needed for situations that extended beyond routine medical procedures into areas where military and medical leadership needed to be combined effectively. The sight that greeted Sarah when she entered the critical care unit would remain burned into her memory for the rest of her life. In the hospital bed, connected to medical equipment that monitored vital signs and provided life support, lay a female soldier whose face was covered with bruises so severe that identification would have been impossible without checking medical records and personal identification. The injured soldier's condition indicated trauma that extended far beyond routine training accidents to include evidence of violence that could only have resulted from deliberate assault rather than accidental injury during military exercises. The pattern and severity of facial bruising suggested sustained attack by multiple individuals, creating injuries that threatened both immediate survival and long-term recovery prospects. Sarah approached the bedside with the kind of controlled emotion that professional training had developed for dealing with extreme situations while maintaining effectiveness under circumstances that would overwhelm people without appropriate preparation. Her first priority was determining the soldier's identity and current medical status, though the emotional impact of seeing such severe injuries on someone who had volunteered to serve their country created feelings that professional training could only partly suppress. The medical chart identified the patient as Private First Class Maria Santos, a soldier who had been participating in advanced combat training when the incident occurred. The details of her injuries indicated assault that had continued long beyond what could be explained as training accident or isolated incident of interpersonal violence, suggesting systematic attack that raised serious questions about security and leadership in the training environment. As Sarah reviewed the medical information and spoke with attending physicians about treatment protocols and recovery prospects, Private Santos began to regain consciousness for the first time since being discovered by training instructors several hours earlier. The soldier's eyes opened slowly, focusing with difficulty on Sarah's face before recognition began to emerge despite the trauma and medical treatment that had affected her cognitive function. "Ma'am," Private Santos whispered, her voice barely audible through injuries that had affected her ability to speak clearly, "you survived?" The words hit Sarah like physical blows as she realized that Private Santos had mistaken her for someone else, someone who this young soldier had not expected to see alive. The implications were terrifying, suggesting that whatever had happened during the training exercise had involved threats or violence that had made survival seem unlikely for people involved in the situation. Sarah leaned closer to hear Private Santos more clearly while maintaining the kind of calm presence that medical situations required for patient welfare and effective communication.
"Private, you're safe now. You're in the hospital and receiving medical treatment. Can you tell me what happened during the training exercise?"
Private Santos's response came through tears that spoke to trauma extending far beyond physical injuries to include psychological damage that would require careful treatment and support for recovery. "They said they were going to kill all of us who reported the hazing. They said no one would believe us and that we would have accidents during training if we didn't keep quiet about what was happening to new soldiers." The revelation struck Sarah with the force of understanding that Private Santos had been victimized not by training accidents or isolated incidents but by systematic abuse that had been covered up through threats and violence against soldiers who had attempted to report violations of military standards and personal safety. The bruises on her face represented evidence of criminal assault rather than military training gone wrong. "You survived," Private Santos repeated, her voice breaking with emotion that combined relief with the kind of despair that came from experiencing betrayal by people who were supposed to provide protection and leadership. "I thought they killed you when you tried to help us report what was happening. I thought I was the only one left who knew the truth." Sarah realized with growing horror that Private Santos believed she had been involved in reporting the abuse and had been targeted for violence as a result. The case of mistaken identity revealed the existence of systematic problems that extended far beyond individual misconduct to include cover-ups and retaliation against soldiers who had attempted to follow proper procedures for reporting violations. As Private Santos collapsed in tears, overwhelmed by the combination of physical trauma, psychological stress, and relief at believing that help had survived to address the systematic abuse she had experienced, Sarah understood that her role in this situation would extend far beyond medical support to include the kind of leadership necessary for exposing and eliminating corruption that threatened the safety and welfare of soldiers under military protection. The tears flowing down Private Santos's bruised face represented more than individual trauma, they symbolized the failure of military systems designed to protect soldiers from exactly the kind of abuse and retaliation that had resulted in her current condition. Sarah's response to this situation would determine not only Private Santos's recovery but also whether systematic problems would be addressed or allowed to continue threatening other soldiers who lacked the power to protect themselves from predatory leadership and criminal misconduct.